And we are back. Welcome back to the 2019 School Scrabble Championships. It's day 2, and day 2 means that we will leave today crowning champions in each of our divisions. I'm Kevin Belinkoff. To my left here is Josh Sokol. To my right, Will Anderson, both Scrabble champions and experts in their own right. We'll see Jackson Smylie in a bit, and we'll get things started with our high school division. An important game.
Exciting.
There are 3 high schoolers that have just 1 loss. They are tied for the lead, and even that's a little unusual to have no undefeated player at this time. That really shows you how difficult the high school division is this year. We saw amazing games yesterday.
Amazing. It's really, really tight up there at the top. I don't think I've ever seen something like this in such a championship, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in these next couple games.
We've got, as I say, 3 players tied for the lead in the high school division, 3 teams, all undefeated, tied for the lead in the championship division, and we'll see them a little bit later today. We've got some announcements going on outside. I don't know if you can hear them. And as soon as those are done, we will get underway with our first matchup, which is Dustin Brown. We've seen him before. And a new player, McKenna, who's in 2nd place. And this is, his 4th tournament ever?
Something like that, yeah. He's really mounting the ranks very, very fast. I don't know if, Will, you know anything about Leo? He has like a really good average score on cross tables. That's all I know.
Yeah, it's given the caliber and the experience of the players that are currently among the elite in the high school division, it's amazing for somebody who's only played 3 tournaments.
I think this is his 4th tournament, yeah.
To be right up there in the standings. So clearly a lot of natural ability. I think we've just learned that he's made good friends out in the West Coast with Zach Ansell, 2-time former champion. Good person to get to know if you're looking to rise in the ranks quickly.
It's true. It's East versus West. Dustin from Connecticut. Leo's from California. We've seen pretty much a national flair to the tournament this year with players and teams from all over the country. If we're ready to go outside, we're going to kick it over to the table and get things underway. Maybe we're not quite ready. There we go. Okay. That's Leo to our left in the kind of light powder blue, and Dustin to our right.
Oh, that's great. The color scheme is just...
It should be easy to follow.
Yeah.
It should be easy to keep an eye on who's who. They draw to see who goes first, and you can see they had to draw again, so they each drew the same letter to start off. You want to be the closest to the beginning of the alphabet, gets the opportunity to go first. Going first is an advantage. In what, you get the extra turn? Is that the primary advantage? Just that...
Oh, yeah, there's certainly the extra turn, but I feel like Josh is a good candidate. Josh, what are you thinking of on your first move of the game that's going to be a little different than what I might do?
I'm thinking, how can I really throw my opponent off with my first play? What can I do that'll make them screw up in any sort of way?
Yeah,
Boy, you sound like a lot of fun to play against, Josh.
Yeah, Josh is looking to set the tone of the game.
It can be a mental game. It can really be a mental game, and I guess that's what you're saying is you kind of take advantage of what you can to get any edge you can. When you're playing at a top level, most of the words are pretty well known, so you've got to use whatever edge you can.
So it looks like Leo's drawn a blank. We caught a little glimpse of his racket.
Is Leo going first? Yeah, that's Leo's.
Unfortunately, as the U.
That is Leo's rack because you can see over it. Yeah, so he's going to trade some in. He's going to keep a T, a blank. Oh, there we move it over there. Thank you. That's a T, a blank, and an E. Good thing to leave behind.
That seems perfect.
Well, there was. I did spot that if he had. I mean, this is a very low probability word, but he could potentially, I think, have played wetsuit on that turn.
Oh.
If I'm reading the rack right, but but the instinct that he showed there to get rid of his W and U, which really are, we call it synergy, when tiles work well together or less well together. You can just look at the backdrop of the School Scrabble Championship and you see that CH combination in the word school. Those are 2 letters that are very, and championship. You can see that those the C and the H together have great synergy. You see them in words together a lot. WU, one of the worst 2-tile combinations as far as synergy. So dumping it is a good idea, as we see.
We begin with Molt to get us started.
It's an interesting play. Normally, you can put normally players at certain like higher levels of play, they will tend to play the word a bit further to the right.
Yeah, just put
They
the
wouldn't
put the
open-
O on the
they wouldn't open
star.
the double word score. But it's an interesting decision because Molt takes an S both ways. So we'll see how that works out if either of them know that Smolt is a word.
Well, Leo does have an S to go along with the blank. Anything you see anything good there?
You can see an enthused.
Enthused, yeah.
Enthused. It started off with an E, a T, and a blank. So he certainly helped himself along the way with that S. He threw in a U and got one back. That's sort of one of those unwritten laws of Scrabble. Whenever you trade something in, you're destined to get something that.
Sure, it does
that
feel
would-
like that
yeah.
sometimes.
See the score at the top of the screen. Dustin pulled off 12 points for Molt. Leo, of course, yet to score. Took advantage, by the way, of going first and passing. I mean, you give up going first, but you don't really lose a whole lot in that. He's going to play meth down to the double word, keeping ESU and blank on his rack.
And he gets the W back.
Gets the
We'll
W
look
right
at that
back,
later.
yeah.
That's the way it works. You just trade something in and look what comes back. You mentioned C and H. There it is on Dustin's rack. We see chain and OB to throw at the end there.
That looks like a really nice rack to score with, but it doesn't. I can't really see anything great for Dustin to do. He's probably going to have to just tread along there with something like hob and molto, which is I think a musical term.
Right, molto is also a factor involved with molt. Maybe he placed it there because he didn't want to expose the molt-o hook to the double word lane. Could be a consideration.
And it is one of those words that because it takes the O at the end, if you know that, that's going to be a big advantage to use. Your word knowledge is really the primary thing that's going to set players apart. And then once you get players of equal knowledge, it really becomes a strategy, how they use the board, how they use their tiles. And we're in the high school level here. These guys know a lot of words. They know the common words. They know words that are strategically helpful in the game.
Yeah, and just by virtue of them being in high school, being a little older, having played Scrabble for longer, they probably have honed their intuition strategically even further beyond what they were if they were players in the championship division.
Well,
So-
Dustin played school Scrabble. Leo didn't. Leo's just been
Right.
playing for about a year or so. We see a chew, the sound you make when you sneeze.
That's a nice play.
The H hits the triple letter, so that's good for him. And we move over to Leo here.
All right,
He did
let's
get
see
that
if
W
he's,
as well as a U. Is there something in there?
Let's see if he knows his Kate Bush songs well here. He can spot Withers on his rack. But you're really looking to get rid of the U and the W as soon as possible, just like on his first rack. So it's possible that he's just. Oh no, it looks like he's lining
I'd
up.
play
Oh,
outware.
It looks like he's, as Kevin likes to say,
Yeah,
he
you put out in front of everything,
and
that's
he's using that principle to see that. I think he clearly sees that he's got a valid pair of words of outwears or outswear, except I guess outswear doesn't quite fit.
it?
So he's going to have to decide that outwears
Is
a valid word,
there, yeah.
which is not a gimme, especially if you haven't studied it. Oh, he's
But
reaching
if you
for the
know,
slip.
if once you see your opponent reach for the slip and circle something, that means they've got a blank. It's like a dagger sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, and then he grabs all the tiles at once and dumps it. Oh wait, no.
Okay, so he.
I see what
All
happened
right,
there.
interesting. Yeah, Josh,
He
what
didn't
happened
realize
there?
that it didn't fit on the board. He didn't realize that outswear did not fit on the board, and he realized as he was laying the play down, exposing all of his tiles, that unfortunately it does not fit.
So he intended to play outswear.
Okay,
now
look,
he's readjusting.
Yeah, I think he's deciding.
There you go.
That's
have
a great way.
Great
to,
adjustment.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, so he does play outwears, and when the play doesn't become official until he hits the clock. So the kind of pattern is you'll put down the word, you'll count up your score, you'll announce your score, and then hit the clock. That's when your turn officially ends, and that's where Dustin, if he wanted to challenge, he shouldn't challenge until that point. And of course he won't. He's taking a look at it, but he looks to be looking at his tiles and accepts the play.
Yeah, I think he's
I think he knows the word.
knowing that word and just moving on and realizing game is early.
It's a great way to bounce back from Leo, I think.
Sure.
It's very easy to do something like that and be like, oh my God, I'm so dumb, I can't believe I just did that, and just get in your own head. It's great that he just snapped right back without wares. Great find.
Totally agreed.
60-point lead right now for Leo after that bingo. And he did open up that vertical lane up to the triple word, which is exactly what Dustin's going to do. He plays bops.
Yeah,
that's a good play.
That looks totally great. Yeah, that S is really easy to dump some of your less bingo-friendly tiles, and that's exactly what he's opted to do. So we like that play.
Now, we mentioned Leo in second place with one loss coming in. Tied with Jem Birch, who we saw play yesterday and actually lose. He actually has the lead right now in terms of margin of victory or spread. And in third place, Chloe Fatz, as we saw her yesterday, defeat Jem. So those three are kind of locked into it. Only two players can make the final. Dustin's got two losses. A third would pretty much take him out of the possibilities of making the final. But if he's able to win here, especially if he can get a nice sizable win, he's right in the thick of it.
So he sees the word Sokol on his rack. The only place that does play is once again with Molto. We'll see if he sees that opportunity.
Yeah, which Molto is
looking.
It's an obscure 5, so it will be impressive to see that go down. But not the easiest position. I guess maybe if he doesn't see a play like that, maybe something like aloof through the O of outwares might be reasonable to find.
That is, yeah. It's interesting that he has two O's, and the only vowels he can really use to score
are O's,
and maybe a U, and you really can't do much with a U, as we know.
Pondering there.
Yeah, so sometimes it's interesting to see his eyes. You want to just look away, kind of get into your head and not have anything, any letters on the board or anything influence you.
There are times when I'm not looking at the board, but my mind is racing, trying to think of what words I might have on my rack, what letters I'm looking to combine them with. So I stare into space a lot during my...
If I do that, I'm generally thinking about lunch.
Nice.
I can see something like what he has there, Oka or Oaf, come down next to Meth. You would prefer to get rid of the F. The C, we were talking about it yesterday. The C seems like a bad tile at face value because you can't form any two-letter words with it, but it's actually a pretty nice tile for the longer words, as Kevin was mentioning.
And also the F would get a couple extra points depending on where he's putting it. But yeah, the C is a letter that, as Josh said, you get to love more as you keep playing.
Remember the game we saw between Jem and Chloe? It was bam, 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 bam.
Yeah,
these guys are going to take their time. It's an interesting to see the different strategies now.
That's an interesting idea.
That's a good play.
FLOE, and the F hits a double letter, so he's going to get 8 points in one direction, another 8 in the other direction, 16 points for just that single letter.
Yeah,
and he'll extend his lead a bit. And very quick, just when we talked about how they were taking their time, Dustin doesn't and puts down a Vaunt. That V up in the middle there is going to pretty much take out that top of the board.
Actually,
there is, Josh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take this one. So Vaunt, it does look like is a very defensive play with that V there, preventing any two-letter words from reaching the triple word score in the upper corner. But this will be a very, very interesting word knowledge test. Do these players know the obscure 6-letter word avant? You can actually put an A in front of that word. And if Leo were to know that, or if Dustin were to know it, that is going to be a huge potential follow-up that lets you play any word you want with an A in the second place in the word, second position. Very flexible scoring spot if you have an A and know that word, avant.
And even if you do know the word, it's another question whether you see it or not, because a word that starts with V, you're just like, oh, that's it. That part of the board is dead.
Yep.
But even if you know the word, I hope one of them does, because it's a very obscure word. It's an interjection. I think it means like to dismiss. It's like avant with you or something like that.
Have you ever
Old
used it in a
English word.
sentence? Have you ever
Well, I
been
just
talking?
did.
Well, I know, but that's prior to that.
Not a common usage, I would say, for most of us.
So it looks like he's using his A up elsewhere.
Yeah, so he
We'll
saw
have to
the
wait
A.
and
Could,
see.
And this is a good play. If this looks like a very good play. I don't think he even had a really awesome play with Avant there. So I think AWOL is going to be a solid play in this position. What I'm really wondering is, does Dustin know Avant and think that maybe Leo doesn't? Because if that's true, that's an awesome play by Dustin.
Right.
It's already a good play and was probably his best play on that turn.
Ooh, look
but
at
it would
this.
be even better.
Look at this. What's
now,
happening?
he's,
here?
now, is yo-yo good?
It's not.
Yeah, I
but
didn't
it is,
think so.
What
yeah,
a plausible word that is. And if Leo doesn't challenge, which
doesn't look like he's going to.
and we all know what a yo-yo is. It just happens to
I think it's a
be
trademark
trade
term.
name,
Yeah,
and
it's
it is not in
it's
the
it's.
dictionary.
I mentioned that when you challenge words, you never forget them. I played yo-yo once. Somebody challenged it, and that's why immediately I said that's no good.
That is such
So-
a good play
so-
by Dustin because it's such a hard
We all
challenge.
think
and
it
it's,
should be a word.
Yeah, and it's such a
anyways,
good
you know?
play, right? Just look at the huge number of points he got.
And
for
you get
the
rid of two
Y.
Y's, which is
Yeah.
not what you want. I mean, the Y's gum up your board a little bit too.
Yeah,
So now-
Leo
cool.
goes ahead and lets it go because he has a huge X play to come.
Sure.
Yeah, so the X hits a double letter. It goes in two directions, 32 points for that. There is a letter that goes at the end of that OX that
Yes.
could open up that part of the
Even
board.
two, but both of the Y's are
They're
gone,
gone,
so
yeah.
no Oxy anymore.
And
but
probably not a lot of O's left because they seem to be all over the board as well.
yeah, so we'll see who gets first dibs on that big spot that's
Yeah,
just
this,
opened up.
this
on
board has
the
so
middle
many
column.
opportunities if they just know Avant and Oxo and just, I mean, there's a
look
lot
at
of
this.
scoring to be had.
Look at this. This is a nice rack. He's cleaned his rack up with yo-yo, and now he has beautiful, beautiful combination here. Let's see if you can spot anything. I see dip nets.
And stipend, yeah.
Stipend is, I guess, a more common word.
If he's,
missed.
yeah, if he spots those, he'll definitely.
Now you
play.
say you see dip nets. We all see dip nets. We just don't know it's a word. So that's sometimes you get the syllables and you get the kind of compound words that might have a few
Sure.
different words within that, but knowing the actual word is a good one is very helpful as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see if he shuffles tiles a little and.
Now going back to AWOL, that's an acronym. Some are good and some are not. You just have to know what's in the dictionary and
have
what's
to know it,
available.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can't play something like CBC, but you can play something like AWOL. You just got to know those weird words.
And of course, OK, we were mentioning yesterday, recent addition.
Oh, here we go.
So he does play.
Nice job. I
He
think
does
got
play
it.
molds,
Yes,
and he
yes.
plays stipend as well.
Impressive. That is so
That's a
impressive.
very nice find there.
And while he knocked out the lane after the Y and the E with the ox there, he opened up something down at the bottom. Of course, you could put an S at the end of stipend. There's
Sure.
two S's and a blank still out there. So still
No help to Leo there.
still rather early in the game. And with that move, Dustin grabs a 7-point lead, 180 to 173. It's back and forth. Sometimes you get those games, it's just every turn there's a lead change. Other times, one person way out in front and the other one, a couple nice moves, takes the victory at the end. So
Yeah.
we'll see what this one's looking like, a kind of a boxing match where they're just pounding each other back and forth.
Yeah, very impressed with both players so far.
Yeah, really nice job on both ends. We'll see what Leo does with this rack. It doesn't appear to be very many options. There is one word that I don't know if they know. It's a very bizarre looking word, epigeic. That
Oh,
would
wow.
fit
I would
for
be very happy to see that
a
myself.
lot of points with the P and bops, making ER. But what is that? That's the epigee, basically. It's pertaining to an epigee, or no, epigee isn't even a word.
Yeah, you're thinking of a word that starts with A. I'm
See,
not even
now,
sure what that word is.
Josh is making up words, but we all buy it because you sounded so certain. And that's we talk about the kind of the mental side of game. If you're playing one of you guys and you're a player who knows your history and that you guys are really great players, you can pretty much put down anything. You ever take advantage of that and intentionally put down a word you know is a phony because you know your opponent's intimidating?
Speaking of phonies, let's see what's going on here. It looks like he's going to lay down pig tie. Wow, that would be really cool.
Pig tie, interesting. Hog tie is good, but you have to wait until I guess a
very
pig becomes a
interesting.
hog before it's official.
Yeah, you can hog tie, but not pig tie. Oh, how interesting that will be if that goes down.
He looks like he's talking himself out of it. Oh man.
I do. To your question, Kevin, it's taken me a long time to get comfortable with playing a word that I know to be invalid. You just hate that risk that goes along with it of what if they catch me and I get 0. So it's always
It's a risk-reward thing,
It's
yeah.
always the move that has the largest downside of any of the moves you can try. But of course, it also might have a much bigger upside. So you have to weigh.
I'm kind of freaking out here. Oh, okay. He's playing epic.
Epic.
It looked
Okay,
like
that's a
he was
reasonable
gonna
move.
lay down Nice, and as we might know, Nice spelled Niece, but it is a very commonly misspelled word in the
Yes.
Scrabble world. I've seen two top players misspell the word Nice, making Neice, and we all know
I
that
before E.
rule I before E, but maybe I don't know what came up to them like when they were playing Nice, but it's happened before, and it was actually I remember Conrad
That's who I
Bassett
thought it
Bouchard
was.
had
He was
that
an
happen to
incredible
him.
player, obviously, but he did.
Do you remember that story, Will?
I'm not sure I know the full story.
Basically, at a nationals, Conrad was playing now national champion Joel Sherman, and Joel Sherman played Nice the wrong way, and Conrad held the play,
But did not jump.
but he was going a bit crazy. He was like, "Am I crazy or is he crazy? Like, who's misspelling this word?"
Yeah, it's so
And
interesting. when
he
that
ended
happens.
up trying to challenge it, but Joel had thought that he had never held the word in the first place, and it was a big.
No, he had never held
controversy.
the play. He had never
Yeah.
stopped play to consider a challenge.
Yeah, and they ruled against Conrad, and Conrad was very angry at that decision.
All over a little 5-letter word.
All right,
Good
here we
play
play Pigged. He did find something to
word,
get
huh?
rid of the G's. So Pigged hits the board. Very close game here between these two, back and forth. And on his last turn, you saw Dustin try and clean out his rack by playing the O and the R, I believe, and didn't get any help at all because he's now up to 5 vowels and 2 consonants.
Yeah, Dustin on his previous turn played Orc. He had 2 R's and 2 A's on that turn. Arc would not have fit in that spot, which scores nicely. But he did, I think he kept 2 I's, an A, and then RS, which you love to see RS with the big stipends hook just staring you in the face.
But there's not much you
But
can do.
he's
Airs
not-
or
yeah,
auras or
he's
something
drawn
like
2
that.
more vowels, so he's got an issue that he'll have to resolve.
Now, they are tracking the tiles. We've talked about that. So he knows that I believe there's just one other S, or is that the last S that he's holding on to? Appears as
There's
if there's
gonna be
one
one
more,
more,
and there's another blank. So he's going to hang on to it for as long as he can. At some point, he's probably going to want to use it to stop Leo from having a chance to put something there that could be valuable.
And
So
look
I
what he
think-
just did, Aria.
Yeah, that was a very aggressive setup for his S, and it also is going to yield potentially a very large score to the triple word score to Leo, but he's caught Leo with just all 1-point tiles.
Not a
so
lot
he
you can
can't
do
really
there,
score
yeah.
that much up there.
Instead, oh, look at that. We didn't even
Whoa.
see that, or I didn't see it. When
Oh,
when he
I
put
I
down
did see it,
stipend,
but-
I see it, I
he
did
plays
see it.
oxen as well
That's
as
a great
eat. So
find.
to use just the 3 single point tiles
First 20
and make
people.
oxen for 11 points, go down, make the word eat for 9 points, and then grab a couple points as well for the other word that he made.
Great
Really
find.
effective use of normal, average, unimpressive tiles.
Yeah, that's an impressive play. You wouldn't expect every player to instantly think to slot a letter between the ox and then the N 1 space away. I'm liking that. I do think that neither player at this point, I could guess that I don't think that they're aware of Avant. There have been some good plays that could have gone up in that corner, so I don't think we're going to see that play, but never say never. I've said that sometimes where I didn't think that players would see it, but then late in the game they have a flash of insight and an epiphany, and you'll see it go down. So
We see mad along with
All right, so
the
now
famous
board-
AA, the first word in the Scrabble dictionary.
so
AA
lava.
is a good one.
Hawaiian
And we
lava.
mentioned Avant. You were talking about possibly putting an A in front of that, and maybe that they just didn't know the word. it's also possible that they've just forgotten because we've moved on from that part of the board. And we talked a little bit yesterday about the importance of making a note, not letting go of it. Maybe you can't use it now. Maybe you can't use it for your next 3, 4, 5 turns, but it's still there. And if you can always keep it in the back of your head to go back there, it's still going to be available.
Yeah,
and in a close game like this, look at a 5-point game.
You just are juggling so many different factors and considerations in a game of Scrabble. It is so hard to keep track of them all. Each individual one might not be that complicated, or they might be very complicated, but there's just so many different tasks that you're juggling. It's easily possible. I have it happen to me all the time that I have an idea for a play early in the game and it just slips my mind as the play keeps going.
Your eyes have been way off that part of the board. We just kind of move over.
Here.
All right, he's going to play sync along with playing the word MIDI, M-I-D-I, as well as R-E-S, all valid words. And we talked about the stipend sitting there for a long time with the S. Now all of a sudden, he took it out of play. He grabbed an S but couldn't take advantage of it there. And Dustin's miserable tile draws continue.
I think we're going to see an exchange here.
Through no fault of his own, Aria was a great attempt to get as many vowels off of his rack as he could, and it just turned out that he kept 2 vowels and drew 4 more. You can't plan for that. He did as good of a job as he could to avoid it, but it's happened anyway. Yeah, I think an exchange could be a good idea here.
Yeah, as we saw, I mean, stipends was a hook, a very important spot there that was blocked by Eat, and then everything that had to do with Aria opening a lot of the board has just been shut within two or three turns. So now it's things are settling down a little bit. It looks like there aren't that many places to score, so I think they're going to be racing for a bingo here.
Dustin's been struggling with the tiles all game. I mean, don't forget he played yo-yo, he played a few others. So he keeps the E, the A, and the S and throws back U's and I's.
Which we like that.
Which means that I'm going to bet he draws the Q. That inevitably happens when you send that stuff back. He's going to move down from
Nice
K to make, is it Kiefer? Kiefer?
Yeah,
Kiefer.
Kefir.
I've had someone correct me on that word. I think
okay.
Kiefer, I think, is how they
Kiefer.
pronounce it in maybe Dutch or Danish or
That's
something.
a really good play, right? To play an obscure 5-letter word with a K and an F in it for a lot of points.
It's
that's
a fermented beverage made from cow's milk. Kefir.
Yeah.
Oh, but look
Kefir.
at, oh, wow. Oh,
All right,
look
so
at
he
the
got-
rack Dustin drew.
So he kept an E, an A, and an S. He picked up Z-I-N-G, which is a great, it's going to be a word on its own, but it also puts you can put a lot of letters in front of it as well.
There's
Look
so
at these
much that could happen
options.
here. Josh, what do
Oh,
you
he
see?
sees it. Okay, he sees a very good option.
Yeah,
there.
beautiful.
So that's the cheap one, but he'll take it for sure. A-D-Z. The Z is a triple letter score, so he gets 30 for it in one direction and 30 in the other direction. Moving over to Leo's rack, he did pick up a Q and a blank, and that could be important. We know that there's some U's and some I's stuck in the bag because Dustin just threw them back there.
Right.
But he doesn't have much to go with it, the Q and the blank with the V, E, N, and B and L.
So it'll be very interesting to see what Leo does here if he holds on to the Q, presuming that he'll draw a U at some point. But maybe he'll just decide to exchange and go for his own bingo. And if he draws a U after this, he'll probably regret his decision. But what can you do?
Let's go back for a second to ADZ and ZA that Dustin played. Just 2 letters got him enough points to get right back in this game. Scores 311 to 305. It's anybody's game at this point. Every point is going to count. Every move is going to count. He's going to send the Q back. So he's keeping the blank, the E, and the N.
I think we like this, right? I think we like this idea. I like that idea.
He's a bit ahead. He doesn't want to hold on to the Q for that long.
Now we know. Oh, look at it. Of course.
Oh my gosh, he had a beautiful leave of G-E-I-N-S, and he drew U-U.
That's
He's
I mean,
had some
those
terrible
use
draws.
they just keep coming back to him.
Yeah.
But again, some good timing with some powerful letters has put him in. He played EX, didn't he? I think he did play. That was Dustin's move.
So he had played yo-yo.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah,
Leo
no, Dustin.
responded, yeah.
But he did get an opportunity to play the ZA and ADZ.
Yeah, well, let's go back to that because he had an even better play. And when
Agnizer.
Jackson tells him after this game what he had.
What was it?
He had a bingo on his rack, agonizes.
And that could have gone off of the...
He could have gone in 2 spots on the board.
A-wall or
And
Kefir.
to agonize means to acknowledge. So,
But failing that, Za is a wonderful play. Like Za is actually about as good because it scores 60, 4 points in its own right and leaves a great leave of the ING and an E and an S. You couldn't hardly ask for better bingo tiles than that.
If you were going to draw 2 U's,
Yeah,
you would have actually gone and played that bingo and not worried about it.
It's
Yeah.
only because he drew 2 U's that when he finds out after the fact that he had a bingo, that he'll even be remotely disappointed with his play of Za, which was an awesome play. And I might add, it's not a gimme to see that AD on the board. That Z hook is not an obvious one. It's one that you can only internalize as instant after years of playing and seeing it and probably missing it before.
When you grab the Z, I mean, that's one of those first things you look at. What
Sure.
Z and X are the kind of 2 that you look for as many cheap points as you can possibly get. And the Q, on the other hand, what can I do to get rid of this thing? If I can get some points along the way, that's a good thing.
It's so funny that Dustin drew the 2 U's. Maybe he'll pick the Q and be happy that Leo just exchanged it.
Well, he plays Vug,
It's Vug.
which is, if they did know about that A that could go on top of Vaughn, it's going to
Now
make it
it's-
much more difficult to
yeah.
use. And I'm not even sure how many A's are left. We've seen that to use quite a few. We do see an A, and look, had he not played that, Jane would have been
Jane could
about
have
the perfect play to put up there with the J all going into the triple.
absolutely.
Wow.
Now he's
so
got to
this
look to
is-
find a place for it.
Dustin's ahead by 1 point. What a game. Like, this is down to the wire.
The
Leo is a
games
bit
here-
lower on the clock.
These games have been incredible, I gotta say.
Two-
Have we had a single real blowout in the bunch? I mean, it's
Certainly not in the
been
high
awesome.
school side of
Yeah.
things. It's been back and forth. And we look, there's a combined, 21 and a half minutes left. Chloe and Jem, when they played, they were done by now.
Yeah.
Well, for a while.
Sure.
I think they took about half that time, mostly because of Jem. I think Jem took maybe 5 minutes that entire game.
Very true.
And 4 of it was probably on that one play where he played that bingo. In any case, Leo just a point behind. And it's got to the point in the game where every single move is going to matter. Every single point is going to be relevant. So you kind of surmise the board. Take a look at, there's that triple letter with the after the I and above the I over there in Epic and Stipend. That's waiting for somebody to grab it and do something with it.
It's going to be hard because of the C, though. The C of Epic.
But if you go down, you can just do a cheap
could
3-letter
go
word. I
down.
don't know if there's any F's left, but
There's
fit
only-
or something
the only
like
thing
that.
that can really score there is the D. So that spot
takes it
though
out,
looks
yeah.
juicy. It's
Yeah.
really
The
not
letters just
anyone's
aren't there for
concern.
there, yeah.
Right. So we'll see.
really
It
does.
could be an interesting attempt to get some points if the players know. I'm pretty sure they do.
Do we know how-
ADZ actually
Takes
an
an
E
E,
at
yeah.
the end. Ads can be spelled as a 3 or 4 letter word. That would be a really easy way to take a few points here. But it's not clear that there's a great play using that for Leo.
Do we know how many letters are left in the bag?
There are 9 letters. left
9
in the
letters.
bag.
So you're allowed to trade in if you've got 7 or fewer letters in the bag. Does that play in? Are you thinking maybe that's a possibility?
I don't think he's going
Oh,
to
he
trade.
sees. Oh, he sees
nice
the good
idea.
play.
Yes.
He sees the good play. I think.
Yep.
We'll see what happens.
He spotted
Oh,
Jaunt,
yeah.
which hits
Beautiful,
that J.
beautiful.
Yeah, so the J hits a double letter, so that's 16 points for that, 20 points total. And in a match that is very close, that could make a difference. In addition, he had some good letters left on his rack
Wow.
going into it.
Yeah, he
The
actually.
duplicates come back for Dustin. He draws LL.
Yeah, he just can't.
So his
quite-
last 2 draws, he's played 2 letters of each of his last turns. He drew UU and LL.
Yeah, that's.
In a
just-
close game, at the end of the game, man, that's got to be frustrating.
But he's still right there. And
Oh, look, and he
yes,
knew, nice play.
knew
He
it. Great
he
job.
knew that the E could go at the end of ads, and he was able to drop a U. Now look what he's got, LINS. Not a bad
You'd
tile
like to
to
see-
keep on the
For
rack.
sure, you'd like to see him redraw one of those valuable E's if that's even possible. I guess it is maybe 1 left that he could draw, and if he were to draw it, that would be a real boon to his chances of bingoing.
Now there's going to be fewer than 7 in the bag, so trading in is no longer an option.
Correct.
And one of the letters in the bag is the Q.
Right. Oh,
Now Leo's got to be thinking, all right, I got an I and a blank. That's going to help me with the Q, so maybe I'm going to hang on to at least one of those.
the score is so close. The score being as close as it is opens up a wealth of options to Leo here. He can try as hard as he can to go for a bingo that will surely put the game out of reach, or he can try to score as many points as he can get on this turn and try to stay one step ahead and go for a win that he can achieve without needing to bingo. So it's tricky to know in situations like this what goal to prioritize, and we'll see what option he goes for with this move.
We'll see, because as we know, the Q is out there, and if you have an eye to go with that Q, you can actually play Quit, where Dustin played Vug for a nice 30 points and get rid of the Q that way, so it might not even be that big of a deal to draw.
Very nice.
Well, they each know they don't have it, and they each know that there's about a 50-50 chance that their opponent's got it. So maybe you're kind of analyzing his plays for the last couple moves, looking at did he get rid of some U's? Did he see? I know there's some U's out there. It's really that one letter totally changes the gameplay at this stage of the contest.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kevin. So we haven't really seen this sort of, we just haven't brought up this logic on the stream yet, but both players have used the letter U on very recent turns in the game, which is a great sign for the other player. When you see in a game like this with the Q yet to be played, and you see your opponent playing a U off, that's a wonderful sign that you can say to yourself, if they had the Q, they surely wouldn't have just played their U off by itself, right? They must not have had it. So you saw Vug go down, you saw Clue go down, you saw Jaunt go down.
Right.
The U's are just flying off everyone's rack. They definitely are suspecting that there's a lower than average chance that their opponent is holding the Q right now.
In which case, you're more likely to get it.
Sure.
Which means
Have
in
to
Leo's
prepare for it,
in Leo's case, he's got a little bit of an advantage with the blank, because that can go obviously in any direction he wants. Allow him to play the I, which otherwise he may not normally have
Yes,
done.
I think, the whole upshot of this is if he's thinking along those lines, as Josh said, it's so important that he not play his I here so that he retains that really nice play of Quit in the upper left corner through the U
see
above.
that for one
That
thing.
would be an amazing
You have a
thought
blank on your rack,
process.
your time is dwindling down. You have, like, there's so many things you can try to do here, and you just have to, like, see what will happen if I draw this letter. There are 2 tiles in the bag. This is an incredibly rich position, and let's see what Leo does as his time is almost at 3 minutes.
He's going to have several more moves to make in this game. So with the clock down to ticking right to the 3-minute level, he's going to have to make a choice.
All right, he's going to play V,
wow.
gets rid of the V.
So he could have played Vi in that spot, but he
kept
opted
the
to
I.
play V with
Keeps the
the
I.
E.
What
That
a
could be
great
could
play.
be an incredible game-changing move if he draws the Q here.
Let's see.
Well, we'll get to his in a second, but in the meantime, earlier in the game, this is a gold mine of a rack, but not right now, because there's not a lot of places that he can go with this.
There's no bingo. The bag is empty.
Red line, or it
Yeah,
doesn't go
red
anywhere.
line
Yeah.
would play through an E, but there's just none available. So, oh man, Dustin.
Now he's got to think, do I hang on to the I?
He's thinking. He's
it's-
thinking a lot of things. Right?
Yeah.
He's thinking, wow, I am so close to a bingo here. I can taste it, but Leo's play of V on his last turn just cut down one potential place for him to play a 7-letter word alongside a wall.
Right.
Leaving really the best option would be alongside Kiefer,
Right.
which isn't really that easy a place to play a bingo. So it's very difficult to balance what to do here, I think.
So he has an R and an N in his hand. And
Oh,
okay, so he
stalking,
played
he's
runt.
stalking.
Now, that could be a defensive play, figuring, okay, Leo may have held on to an I, may have the Q or a blank. That'd be a great place for him. I'm going to play defense here. There is the Q,
Yeah.
and he picked up an I.
We have to mention a critical nuance, which is that the bag is empty now.
Okay, so now they know exactly what their opponent's
that
got.
play of runt was tremendous by Dustin. He played it instantly, knowing that Leo had the Q and the I lined up to go in that spot. So that's awesome, right?
Oh,
like
man.
Dustin knew that there were no tiles in the bag and that Leo has the letters that he has. He blocked that huge play of quit, and now it's going to be much more difficult for Leo to score very well with his cue. That was a really good play.
He's
by
under
Dustin.
he's
This is
under
crazy,
2.5 minutes. Now we haven't really had a
He's
game
gotta
where
play
the clock
QIS.
mattered.
He has to play QIS.
Yeah,
And
which
He's
I
looking at
think he will.
Kiefer's, maybe
If he plays
putting the cue
QIS
there.
and Kiefer's Dustin's going to be behind by a lot.
And it looks like
Down to
that's-
2 minutes, 2 minutes and 4 seconds left. He's got a lot going on in his head now because this is not going to be his last play. He's going to have 1 or 2 more plays, and he's going to need time there to figure out what he wants to do. So keep an eye on that clock. You saw it's under 2 minutes. Leo just took a glance at it. His heart's beating. You can tell he's really got to make a play quickly, but he's got to make the right play with just a 9-point lead right now.
So cheese and Kiefer's is the correct play for Leo to
This
make.
is crazy.
You can maybe make cheese out of Kiefer. That's what he's going to try and do.
That's true. Okay, here it comes, which is a good idea for him.
That's
to play
exactly what
this.
he's going to play. And look, he didn't turn the board around. He wasn't going to take the time with less than a minute and a half on his clock. Just put it down, and there he goes.
Okay, now this is going to get crazy.
This
here.
is crazy now because
Yeah,
he
go
has
ahead, Josh.
delis on his rack. It doesn't look like he can put it anywhere, but he can. He
Yeah.
can put it next to AWOL and V. He makes the word leve.
Yeah.
And delis, and that is the only way he can win this game.
He's got to see levy, that New Orleans word we're all familiar with, if the levy's breaking or holding. If he thinks to put his E in that spot, he'll win. But if he doesn't see it, he has no way to score enough points.
He's got a lot of time. I mean, compared to Leo for certain.
Oh, what
So
a
he can
nail-biter.
take as much as he needs, really. He's got the word. He's got over 10 minutes.
This would be an incredible play
And
to
that would-
find to win the game.
That would
here.
win the game. He's got 30 points to make up. So he knows that if he can go out, that's pretty much his only chance because Leo's got some letters on his rack that can help him.
This is really
And that's
amazing.
the one place it can go.
Well, you know what? I mean, I say that he can only win by going out, but it's not actually true. I mean, Leo still has to make the best play next turn. If Dustin plays lid underneath QI, Leo will need to find his highest scoring play in the position to come out ahead because the ES on Dustin's rack that he'll have left over will be able to score him so many points as well. This is more than a nail biter.
All right, so he's got the time here. He sees delis. Maybe he's thinking, as you correctly point out, Josh, that this is going to take me 2 turns. So now he's thinking, what's my one
Look at the
play?
body language.
What might Leo play, and then what can I play? So you're thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead at this point.
Right.
And on one hand, he's got time, and that's just going to torture him. On the other hand, Leo doesn't have time. That's going to torture him.
Right.
So you're seeing why Scrabble players often have ulcers and lose their hair, like myself.
These
It's
games
just
are wide.
yeah.
But totally to add on to Josh's point, if he doesn't see the place to insert the E between the L and the word V, Josh correctly pointed out he could just play lid underneath the Q. And the great thing about that, if he can realize it, is he just needs to realize if he can't find his play of delis and levy, he needs to not go out and play all of his tiles on that turn. He needs to prolong the game to ensure that Leo has one more turn to make an error or to do something suboptimal. Because with only a minute left on his clock, that is incredibly, having been there more times than I care to remember, it's an incredibly pressurized situation where you make your worst errors when the clock's ticking down and you just can't think clearly.
Now, we can't see it, but Leo has a BINR on his rack. Brine comes to mind, but that's not going to go anywhere. So the question is, Dustin knows that. What do I play that can keep Leo from going out on his turn and winning the game? Hopefully getting him to hang on to the B because it's worth a lot of points, although that's a pretty easy letter to get rid of.
Sure. I just don't
I'm looking
think
at this position.
there
It's
is
so
a place.
complicated. There's so much math involved in this end game, and this is where Scrabble becomes most like chess, where you're calculating everything. You have perfect information. You have to just see the best play, or just see a play that wins the game. And with the time ticking down, I mean, Dustin should be taking all of his time here to ensure that he's the most likely candidate to win this game. So I don't know. I think Lid will come down. If it doesn't, if he sees Levy,
that'll be amazing. You tip your cap to him for making an incredible play if he sees the Levy options with OD and delis.
Because we were talking about V and how great a play that was to leave QI on the rack. But we had no idea at the time what that would mean for the end game.
Absolutely. It totally escaped my notice in the moment. Oof, he's got his D.
You saw his just reading his eyes and stuff. He had to kind of reset his head. He was focused right on the board. He took a second, just looked away, and came right back to it. He's got time.
He's got time to. He could even just take 30 seconds to just look up and breathe right now. Honestly, that would be a good use of his time. Just because he has enough of it that he can kind of
the mental side of
recenter.
things. And they found it.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
he
is
took
awesome.
all that time,
Yes.
and you saw the little light bulb go off above his head. The moment he saw it, his eyes lit up, and he was able to go out with delis. That is going to win him the game. Look at Leo. He's like,
What can
I wonder if
you
Leo
do?
saw that the whole time. And you know,
it looks from his reaction. It looks from Leo's reaction like he did. He wasn't like stunned the way you would
This is
expect.
a 1-point win, guys.
a 1 point win just from that.
1-point win.
And you notice, this is what good players do. They've immediately gone into analysis mode.
Yeah.
The game's over, nothing we can do. Now let's, I could have done this, I could have done this. Oh, what were you thinking when you did that? We're going to find out a little bit about that when Jackson gets a chance to talk to these guys. But what a tremendous game.
I am in shock at
Oh
this.
my goodness.
That was incredible by Dustin.
He took over 4 minutes. Over 4 minutes to try and find it. They may challenge. Is it going to challenge the last word?
Sure, yeah.
Why not?
They can.
It's a free challenge. There's no reason not to. If you're not 100% sure that OD or delis or levy or award, you might as well challenge them.
Because according to some Scrabble rules, once you've showed your opponent your rack, at the end
that's
of the
it?
game, that's it.
Oh.
But in this case, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. The words
And
are
the
valid.
most interesting part is, do they have the same scores that we have?
Oh, yes.
It's such a close game. Who knows?
Oh,
Maybe
and
they think Leo has won.
they may have requested a recount. That's another thing that happens, especially in a close game, especially in an
There'll be a
important game like
recount,
this.
yeah,
They will go turn by turn. And by the way, we're pretty sure our score is correct, but we're doing it manually as well as we watch the game. So it's not as if this has been done automatically and we're 100% sure the score is correct. And that's exactly what's going to happen now. First, they're going to go over and make sure what the score they have is, that the blanks have been recorded correctly. One of them was an O, one of them was an S, and that can be a time-consuming process, going through every single turn, recalculating it, make sure that your score was right along the way. Inevitably, in most games that get recounted, there's a point that kind of goes a different way.
Yeah. It's rare that it's perfect the first time.
And usually, I mean, we were talking about this actually just before the game. I've
very
never had a
interesting.
result change because of a recount.
Oh, I have, and it does not feel good.
When you think you've won a game by 2 points and then you end up losing that
Well,
game
and it
by
also
2 points.
changes what your strategy might have been. You
Right.
may have taken a little longer to try and find an extra point or two, but of course it wasn't there, and that's just the way it goes. So when you keep score, be careful. If there's a discrepancy, there's nothing wrong with stopping the clock and making sure that the score is right along the way, because it could cost you in the long run. The ties happen in Scrabble all the time, and those are the recounts that are just painful, because you'll find out you made a 1 point error in one direction, maybe it came back the other way.
I just hope the viewers appreciate how exciting that was to see such amazing play on both sides and such intricate decisions that the whole game was turning on. That was a real treat.
Now we haven't really had the clock come into play at all,
Sure,
and here
yeah.
it did on both sides. Leo had very little time, had to go
I just
quickly.
got word
Yep.
that they have the game recorded as a tie and they do not want to recount the game.
Interesting. That's another thing we were talking
Wow.
about. It's so interesting. Right before the contest, Josh and I were talking about recounts, and I said, if you get a tie, take the tie. Why bother recounting?
I've actually done that in a game that I thought I had lost. totally lost. I ended up like eking out a tie, and I was like, no way I'm recounting.
Yeah, just take the tie.
As long as your opponent agrees with you, that's
Now it really
they're
matters.
happy with the tie.
It really matters for Leo because Leo had one loss coming in, was in second place. In some ways, a tie is about the same as a loss for him because that's going to, if you,
From our position, we know that Leo's making out well in this agreement. But from the players' positions, it could easily
absolutely
be, I mean, you have a chance to get a half of a win, which lets you, that's how we score a tie, is that each player is considered to have half of a win in the standings.
Right.
So you'll see if Leo was at 5, he'll now have 5.5. But from either player's perspective, the prospect of losing that half, it can feel worse than gaining the half if you do the recount, depending on the way the standings.
And in most cases, almost every case, you're never going to know unless you're recording your game and you go back afterwards and see what really happened.
They're going to know.
They're going to know because of us, exactly, because we were keeping score along the way. And again, we're assuming that our score is correct. We have people double and triple checking it and keeping score along the way. So it does look as if it would have been a 1-point lead for Dustin.
This is somewhat more exciting than the actual result of the game. I mean, this is the.
It's something, and it's something you're rarely going to see. We talk about Scrabble. We put it on the web for you guys to watch, and we see the same sort of things happen where a player will make a good play or a bad play or whatever. We've never had one where the scoring matters.
This is new for me.
And it's going to be revealed to Dustin that he actually won the game or could have won the game had they gone for a recount.
Honestly, that you would expect maybe to feel mildly disappointed in that situation, but from Dustin's perspective, even getting that tie shows incredible resourcefulness on his part, and he should be really happy with how he played and also happy with the decision to take the tie just because from his perspective, he could easily have lost that half win.
Absolutely.
So we expect like, oh, he might say, oh, shucks, I could have, if we recounted, I would have won.
Right.
But in the moment, I don't criticize any of the decisions that he's making. Certainly not if it's not his plays, and then the decision to take the tie.
In
That's
that game,
fine.
the same thing happened to me. That tied game, I failed to mention, I actually did win that game.
Oh, are they recounting?
Okay.
And now it looks as if they are going to recount.
Okay. Wow.
So
a lot of what we just said.
Just ignore what we said. Never mind that man behind the curtain. They are going to do a recount here, and I hope they actually chose to do it. It didn't. Nobody was influencing it from something they've heard from us, because Leo could be very disappointed in what's about to happen.
I mean, maybe they'll miscount the recount.
That happens. That happens. And by the way,
they both want it to be a tie, probably.
We only have one featured game each round here at our table, and that's where there's going to be a lot of scrutiny. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on the score. What's going on in the regular tournament, inevitably there's been mistakes. That just happens when people are playing Scrabble. So they did take an official. They're calling the game official. They're deciding that a recount is not available. I guess they chose to forego it. So maybe they're just doing to check it out.
That's okay.
But the recount is so for rules purposes, and maybe we can find out exactly what the ruling was. Maybe the score sheet was signed, or something that made the game official.
Look at that body language.
Yeah.
Look at the body language.
They found the point.
Clue that was misscored.
They might have found the point.
Wow.
Oh no. If I was Dustin here, I would be.
It would hurt a little, but
I mean, he was the one. He had 2 losses.
He had 2 losses, so
he's out. He's out.
Yeah.
Now, it's going to be difficult, obviously, with 2.5 losses, or even with 2 losses. More importantly, because of the length of this tournament, it's a rather short one. A 1-point win, a 1-point loss, a tie, they sort of all have the same impact because the spread is going to be so important with so many ties. So while winning by 1 is important and it's good, it's better than losing. Winning by 1 is not the same as winning by 10 or 20 or 100 points.
Sure, right. It's not too different, but you're absolutely right that there are degrees of ways you can win, and that's just amazing.
This might become quite the controversy.
It might, because Leo, let's look at on his side of things. He was in second place.
Sure.
Now I don't know what the pairings were, but it could have been that first and third were playing one another. meaning the half a win keeps them in second place if those two teams, if those two players were. Now that was Jem and Chloe who've already played. Usually there's not a rematch at this point in the tournament. Sometimes there is. So keep track of, you can go online to HasbroGamingChampionships.com, where hopefully you are right now. If you click the scoring button, the score sheets, you'll see what the rankings are. At a time like this, they're moving constantly because games of this round are just completing themselves. And so once they get entered in the computer, you may see somebody move up, and then they instantly move back down, depending on the result of another game. Jackson's getting set up to talk to these guys. It should be fascinating to hear what they have to say.
Can't wait to hear
I'll give you a little secret. We don't get to hear it because there's no speaker where we are.
Well, let's repeat what happened here, because if you're just joining us, there was a recorded tie, and in this format tournament, you were not allowed to recount the game, but actually what ended up really occurring in the game was that Leo McKenna lost by 1 point to Dustin Brown, but they can't go back on the score.
And we are back. This is Jackson here, and we're going to do a quick interview with the two high school players. We have Leo and we have Dustin. That was a crazy game, and for everyone watching, I think we all saw that it was a win for Dustin, but Leo, why don't you tell us just what happened and what the final score was?
Yeah, so it turned out that Dusty had actually miscounted one of his plays by 1 point. So it ended up in our scores that we had actually tied instead of me losing by 1.
And in this tournament, there are no recounts allowed, I guess, to save for time. So the final score of 374 to 374 does stand. So this game was crazy. At first, we thought it was just a normal game going down, and then it all came down to the end game. There were a bunch of crazy plays that happened. Firstly, Dustin, I wanted to ask you about your play of Runt in the end game. What was going through your head, and how did you decide to play that move?
So I saw on my last rack that I had, I didn't have any bingos in there, or at least I didn't see any. I looked it up after, there were none. But I knew I wanted to get out in 2 because I saw that he had a rather clunky rack. So I knew he had the Q and some eyes, and that I could go out with delis where I played it, but I had to get rid of the R and the N. So I could block a play of quit by playing runt, and then go out in 2 and hopefully nab a bunch of points from his rack. However, it turns out that the play of quit, if he had chose to make it, was actually less than QIS and actually might have saved him some points.
So is what you're saying that when you played Runt, you actually saw the Levy and Delis possibility?
Yes, I did.
See, that comes as a big surprise to the people doing commentary, because we all were sitting there as you had 10 minutes left on your clock, and we thought that you were unaware of the Levy spot, because it's a really tough spot to see, and we thought that you were just not seeing the winning play because there's only delis as the winning play. So we thought it was like a clutch find at the very end, but you actually saw it all along. So why are you taking so long to play delis?
I was taking so long because in our scores, if I played delis, we tied. So I wanted to try and find a 20-point player more that could seal the win.
So, over to you, Leo. You did not have 10 minutes on your clock, unlike Dustin. You were in such time pressure. You ended up with 1 minute left. What was it like playing a complex endgame under such time pressure?
It was tough because I thought I was making the best play I could, but it's so much pressure that I think I could have played better and I could have won that endgame if I had had more time and to be able to think about it.
So we are very interested. We're going to go over the board for a second. We are very interested by your play of V-E-E right here, because you had Vi as well, V-I-E, keeping the blank and keeping the E. And we were wondering if you saw the word Vi and if you saw that V had something better. At the same spot, just making V-I-E instead. We were wondering where your thought process was of keeping the I instead of the E.
Honestly, no idea. I had 2 minutes left. I was scared. I was like, I want to play off 2 tiles. That's the first thing I saw, if I'm being honest. Afterward, I was like, oh, maybe I should have played Wove because I gave him a really good spot to go out. But yeah, Vi didn't even go through my head for some reason.
That's interesting because V actually ended up being almost a game-winning play right there. Because by playing V, you kept your I, and by drawing the Q, you actually threatened quit, and that forced Dustin to block your play with Runt. So that ended up being a very interesting endgame. We're also noticing all the way throughout that there are a lot of plays you guys are making with U's in them, even though the Q was out. Dustin, were you aware that the Q was in the bag when you were playing off U after U that you were drawing?
Yes, I was. I had a rack of SEIGN UU. I drew both U's. And it was going through my head. I saw that I had really good tiles other than the U's. And I had the option to exchange because the bag still had 7 tiles left. So I was thinking, maybe I should drop 2 U's. But I saw that there was a Q left. So that's when I decided to play Vug instead, is that I thought, well, if I draw the Q, I'm going to be kicking myself that I just dumped 2 U's.
I see. And also that goes back to when you were keeping EGINS, you drew UU, which is pretty much the worst draw you can get. And then the next turn you drew LL. So you kept drawing these awful duplicate tiles, these awful vowel draws. How are you dealing with this, what we call vowelitis, all the way through your game?
I was just trying to keep it close. First and foremost, I wanted to not let him get away and end up having to rely on a bingo, still making plays that kept me in the game, even if I drew pretty badly. Like Clue, I ended up playing for 20 because it kept it close, rather than trying to set up for a bingo somewhere else.
And so, Leo, when you, throughout the game, you seem to keep your tiles on your rack in a word at all times. Like you seem to put it in different words to see what your best play is. And we noticed many times that you were setting up some phonies on your rack, one of which was you had IGTIE, and we were assuming you were going to play Pig Tie. So what was your thought process with Pig Tie, and why did you end up playing Epic instead?
You know, my brain goes to crazy places. I saw Pig Tie. Yeah. I was like, oh, that looks cool. And then I was like, wait, that's probably not a word. And then I was like, oh, well, what do I do now? And I was like, I'm just going to play there anyway. I don't know.
And there's actually one phony that did end up on the board. It was, in fact, Yo-Yo, and I was wondering whether either of you knew that Yo-Yo was a phony. Justin, when you played Yo-Yo, were you aware that it was phony?
I was not aware it was a phony, but even if in my not being sure, I knew that it was close enough to a word that honestly, if I played it with confidence, that it might slide.
And yeah, that is something we see a lot. Whenever I play a phony, I definitely try to play it as quickly as you played Yo-Yo, because it's really hard to challenge when someone plays something so confidently. Leo, I assume you had not seen Yo-Yo before in a Scrabble context, but obviously it's a common word. Did you consider holding or challenging?
The main reason I didn't challenge Yo-Yo was because I knew I had the play of X the next turn, and I knew that he had just gotten rid of basically any hook for Ox that he could have, because there were only 2 O's left in the bag. So I figured that was like a decent play and that it wasn't worth challenging.
And yeah, Yo-Yo did actually give X back for a lot of points, which was really sweet. And I also wanted to ask Dustin about Stipend. So Stipend was a great find, and it was something you didn't seem to see immediately. And I was wondering if you know Stipend just from anagramming. Is that how you found it, or have you studied the rack before?
I just found it. I don't know how I found it because it doesn't really share any like common endings or common beginnings. It just kind of popped out at me because I knew I had a good rack and I could look for a bingo in there, and then it just kind of appeared.
I see. And I mean, that was a very impressive find. I find personally it's much more impressive when you find a word that is just from anagramming rather than from like seeing the rack and having studied it 10 times. One other thing I want to go back to the board for a second is, Dustin, your play of Vaunt. It was a great play. Got rid of all your clunky tiles, but I was wondering if either of you knew the front hook for Vaunt. There is one letter that can go in front, and that was coming up all throughout the game. It is an A, in fact, of Vaunt. I assume neither of you saw it or knew it. I was wondering if you either of you considered the possibility of a Vaunt throughout the game.
No, that would have been great if I had known that.
And I mean, ultimately in Scrabble, you can only do you can only work with the words that you know. So Vaunt ended up not being an issue because a Vaunt never came up. So, Dustin, I want to ask you, when you exchanged IIUU, keeping AES, which was a great decision, and then you drew ZING. What was your thought process when you saw ZING?
Honestly, I was really happy because those were really good tiles. I was close to seizing, but not quite there. If there was an R, I could play Zingers or whatever it is pronounced. I was happy because after a sea of just like awful letters, I finally got a bunch of tiles I could work with.
And had you seen the possibility of hooking AD with the Z before, or did you just see it as soon as you drew the Z?
I actually didn't see it before, but I noticed that, oh, wow, I could do that. And in my haste of playing the word, because I was so happy that I found the big play, that's when I miscounted I counted as 63 rather than 64.
I see. And there's actually a bingo in that rack. I don't know if you knew it. There's this word agonizes. It means to acknowledge, I think. But ADZ and ZA was a great play. It scored 63 points, keeping a great leave. It looks pretty close, even though the leave of EGINS turned into a U rack with 2 U's that he drew. It was still a very good play to play ZA. And let's see. The last thing I wanted to ask you about was when you played EAT, that was a great play. We'll go back to the board for a second. You played EAT, making oxen. That was a great find, noticing that the E could go between ox and the N. When you played EAT, was that just a scoring play, or were you also thinking about blocking the stipends hook?
I was definitely thinking about blocking that spot. I thought that Dusty might be able to get a lot of points off that hook, and that's mainly the reason why I played it.
I actually had an S there, but I had an S there, but I had a bunch of 1-point tiles. So actually when I played Arya, I was hoping that you'd try to block up top and then I'd draw into something worth more points so I could use my S down by stipends.
That is unfortunate that the S hook got blocked then, because, I mean, even though you drew some more vowels, it still would be nice to have the hook stay open. So, Leo, I wanted to ask you, I heard you're fairly new to School Scrabble. What's your process been like getting interested in School Scrabble and getting better?
I mean, I don't know. I've been playing Scrabble since I was 5, but not competitively until like 3 years ago. And I really, once I played my first tournament, I was hooked. I mean, ever since I've been playing all the time and studying, and it's just, I'm so glad I did it.
That is awesome, and I think everyone in this room shares that sort of passion for words and for Scrabble. So we're going to wrap up here. Once again, this final score is actually 374 to 374. There's no recounting here, so both Dustin and Leo get a tie. I want to thank you both for joining me in this interview, and best of luck in the rest of the competition.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hello.
Okay, thank you for that, Jackson. Fascinating. We did find out the rule very simply in the School Scrabble tournament is there are no recounts. So by now, of course, they do know what the situation was. But in the interest of time, once the scores are agreed upon, they just move on. And as we were saying, maybe that's not so bad about that.
If you miscount a play, I mean, that's on you. You should be counting everyone's play, I guess, at this high school level at least. And if there's a discrepancy, it should be found like immediately, maybe. Anyways.
And again, we know that because this was on our featured table. That's the only reason why this has become an issue, is that we kept our eye on that game, and we certainly saw a lot of interesting plays and really great play. We were just commenting amongst ourselves. The level of play of the high school division this year is phenomenal. It would be at the top of just about any tournament out there. The larger tournaments, smaller tournaments, these kids can really play at a level that we really haven't seen at the school level at all. That's one in the books. We have a couple more rounds left. We'll keep an eye on the championship division as well, where there were 3 teams tied with undefeated records. That may still be the case. And of course, the high school side, there were 3 players tied for the lead. Leo gets a tie in the middle of all that. We'll see how that affects things. So stick around. We're going to take a little bit of a break here, get things set up for our next round, headed towards our finals, which aren't too far away. So be sure and stick with us all day.